let's just go over the definition of narcissistic abuse. Let's be clear of what it means for us before going over the different ways of dealing with this person. So distinguishing moodiness from abuse in relationships. There is a difference. And we need a kind of margin of tolerance in life because people vary so much. We need some space to allow people to just be themselves, some kind of margin, but then there's also the discernment that we need before people cross the line and things become like their behavior becomes abusive, right? Or it becomes something that nobody should tolerate. It's grumpy temperament or moodiness, involuntary reactions. This is what we're going to address first. In this case, there is the habit of reacting out of annoyance or anger because of a lack of self-control. So the person is annoyed and they react. Their reactions aren't intended to harm others. They're not making attacks. They don't make attacks like shouts or insults or aggressively accusing you of something. So what happens is instead of just spontaneously saying something to you, they only say something when you say something. So you say something and then they react. And when people are very annoyed, it's sometimes, a lot of the time, they don't say anything rude, actually. What they're saying is not rude, but they're responding to you or reacting to you with a really horrible tone of voice, a very horrible, angry, cold, bitter tone of voice. And it could just be a normal remark or an acceptable opinion, but they're reacting. And that's why it feels offensive. Their most aggressive reactions are more seldom. So we're just still defining moodiness here. So their most aggressive reactions are very seldom, and they're just not regular enough to really consider it a serious problem. In the moment, it might seem like narcissistic abuse, but if it's occasional enough, then I wouldn't really consider it a huge problem. Like if it's once every one or a couple of weeks that something triggers them and they react, it's not nearly as severe as someone who is just always in a bad mood and like every day you have to put up with them. And then there's mild criticism. This person is criticizing on occasion, but it's, again, the intention is not maleficent. So it's mostly they're doing it just out of annoyance. There are some people out there that have this nature of being critical and pessimistic and just constantly criticizing. I know a lot of people like that, just constantly complaining and criticizing others. They're doing it out of annoyance. It's not for pleasure. It's not to cause reactions in others. It's not to stimulate reactions. They have this nature of being negative. Then there's rude remarks and mischief. So when we're handling this, we should really know the meaning of it before we feel anything, before we jump to the emotions. So what is the meaning of an insult or sarcasm, for example? Because things get subtle in this area, and just relationships in general are subtle. People's behavior ranges, right? So if you're dealing with rude remarks and reactions and mischief, you need to understand the meaning and intention of their remark. Because again, as I said, sometimes it's a reaction, other times it's an attack. Sometimes there's intent to harm, other times there's no intention, it's just annoyance. So in one stage or example, the person is simply annoyed and feeling the urge to react. There's no intention to harm. In the next level, In another case, the person is deliberately trying to offend you and get a reaction out of you, and that's even more narcissistic. So first is mild. The first one is mild narcissism. The second one is narcissism, legitimate. So we have to keep our observations in perspective. In the heat of a moment, a cruel, sarcastic remark with a really penetrating, bitter tone of voice is abusive. But, you know, if you're putting things into perspective, if it just happened one time, it was a bad night, people are going crazy and drinking, and it's chaotic, and you're dealing with this person who has this angry temperament, they're bound to just react to you over anything you say. And it's probably not just you, but other people too. There are people who just have really bad temperaments and they get annoyed easily. But, you know, if you experience one or two hits of attitude, a rude remark one night or one day, and just a bad tone of voice, another reaction, but it's spanning, like, you have a couple of these instances in the span of a month or so, that's a very long time. This is not like a daily regular thing. So that's what I would consider mild narcissism. It's not a huge problem, and it's easier to let go of that sort of behavior, those instances. So it's always good to just forgive people. Whether or not you want to maintain ties with them is really up to you. This is pretty mild, you know, as I said, mild narcissism, mild, difficult behavior. Whether or not you have a connection is up to you to discern. If there's a reason to stay friends with them, or if there's no reason to stay friends, you have nothing in common and this person's just difficult, then just avoid them. So now, dealing with difficult people, distinguishing moodiness from abuse in relationships. Now we're going to cover abuse, bullying, narcissism, and actually, yeah, that's what we're going to cover. And then right here it says attacks as an example. So attacks, what are attacks? These are insults and shouting, and these are regular, these are ongoing. In a narcissistic relationship, this is a regular daily thing. You know, maybe at least once a week you get something, you get some really bad remark from this person, or more frequently, they are, you know, it's if it's frequently that they're doing this, even though if they don't intend to hurt you, if they're reacting frequently, then yeah, that's again, it's narcissistic, and it is abusive. It's hard to deal with someone like that. So if it's more frequent that they're reacting really badly to you, being bitter, sarcastic, giving you a bad tone of voice, giving you attitude, then that's also legitimate narcissism. It's ongoing abuse. But in more severe cases, they are made to harm or provoke reactions in you or others. So attacks may be, and they might even be physical. So there's more intention behind it. The intention to harm or to offend. Then there's criticism and mind games. Criticism is given not just out of complaining or annoyance, but it's given to make others feel inferior. This is more like a bully level where it's deliberate behavior. So they're meant to make you feel inferior. In most cases, the criticism is going to happen both in person and behind the grapevine too. So when there is gossip or talking behind your back in a mild form, again, the person is just complaining, and actually you have to realize people, as a side note, you have to realize people, it's just people's nature to criticize and have opinions of others. So you have to just live with that and deal with it. If someone's criticizing, people have a right to criticize you and explain their opinion about you. If it's a honest opinion, people have their rights to their opinions. So you can't stop them from criticizing or talking behind your back. They can do that. They can say that they don't like this or that about you behind your back. It's just their opinion. They have a right to it. That's speech. But that's different than intentionally doing it as a way of like ruining your image and slander and stuff. Most of the time, it's not intentional. Most of the time, people do that because it's their nature to get annoyed and just talk crap about others. But in some cases, it's intended to make you look bad or spread this big rumor. In rare cases, they do want to spread a big rumor and make you look bad, slander you, and all that. But this is very severe. It's not usually like that. So don't overthink this situation. So there are covert mind games. Really bad narcissists give you covert mind games. They're manipulative. They might act nice on the surface, but really they're just playing with you. Or, and sometimes they'll say, get this thing from the fridge, and really they know it's in the freezer, and so they just made you walk around someplace. They're just making you do things. And then there's also gaslighting. Kind of a modern, very new term, gaslighting, where they're creating a reality and convincing you of it. It's very narcissistic when it's deliberately done. But so things like trickery and lying and deceit and manipulation are played for the narcissist's own pleasure in harming others. Now we're going to deal with how to speak out. I will cover a bit about how to speak up and speak out. But the thing is, this is a Buddhist and Gnostic channel. So, the best way that we Gnostics and Buddhists deal with difficult people is we train our minds to be resilient, to be tough and resilient, and our best interest is to eliminate our conditioning as much as possible, right? To humble ourselves, to reduce our pride, to renounce it. So the best thing, the most spiritual way to deal with things is to be passive and to just ignore. The best thing is to just ignore rude, abusive people. It's hard, so it requires some skill. You can't, there's a certain point where it might be too much for you. So you need to balance this. You have to find your balancing point where you can take a certain amount of, crap and abuse from people. And there's a point where you're going to have to decide if you can leave or not, if it's beneficial or not, because it can be beneficial. It really, especially from the Gnostic point of view, the Gnostics are very interested in becoming resilient. So there's some mental training. Life is a mental gymnasium. You need to train your mind. So you push yourself to handle these people to a certain point, and there's a point where you can't anymore. You get too angry. There's too much emotion. It's too overwhelming. Then you should leave if you can. Or, some speaking out can be healthy. It's a balance of renouncing your pride, being humble, training that humility, and speaking up just to vent a little bit so that you can just get through your day easier, right? This is a skillful practice. There's not one way of dealing with these people and situations. It's always a balance. Balancing out your speech means just that. Speaking more but loosening up on the details so that you don't speak too much. If you've ever found yourself frustrated enough by your own silence, you'll make a habit of pushing yourself to speak up more. Even when your voice doesn't sound right and people don't believe you. From my experience, it's always worth it. If you're someone who doesn't speak enough, it's worth it to just speak more. Just say it. Just get it off your chest. The main thing that you have to let go of is the perfectionism, because that will stop you from doing or saying anything. You have to stop caring what people think. Otherwise, you won't be able to say anything. But it's worth it because it feels really good to speak up and no longer have that grudge or that feeling of just a strong urge or a strong resentment or regret from not speaking up, and the frustration that comes from taking people's crap and knowing what to say and not saying it. It's very hard to let go. What didn't occur to me after my relationship is that after a couple months or so, a few months, there was no longer any fiasco really. It had died away. But I thought there was some bad breakup fiasco still because she continued to be rude to me. So I thought even like a year after our breakup, she's still being rude to me. So I thought this fiasco was still going on. And in fact, it was my misperception to not realize that actually, no, the breakup fiasco's over. She's over that apparently. But I didn't realize that really she's just that bad, that she's always a rude person. So there's no breakup fiasco. She's just always rude, and it's not just me. She's rude to anyone when she's in a bad mood. So that's a misperception that I had. It was really painful to think that, my God, I hate this breakup fiasco is never ending. Why is she still being rude to me? Yeah, that's delusion, because actually there is no fiascos. That's just how she is. She's always like that and always will be, always has been. I just didn't know she could be that bad. I came across a really bad instance one time. I've never seen that when we were together. I've never seen her act so viciously before. But I had to realize that, yeah, that's actually her nature. That's just how she is. It's normal. So sometimes you may not realize that actually this is not just a phase that this person is going through, but they could just be like this. It could be their nature, and you haven't fully recognized that. Maybe you knew from the beginning, yeah, they have a bad temperament, they're kind of a difficult person, but maybe you don't realize that actually they're worse than you think, and it's not just a phase, but they've always been like this. If you wonder if they have any remorse for people, a lot of people do have remorse. A lot of angry people do feel remorse, but it's not until after they've cooled down. If someone's saying a lot of stuff about you, negative things, they're being so rude to you, it gets overwhelming. It's better to say something than nothing when it gets too overwhelming. You have to stop caring what your voice sounds like. Don't worry about what you say. It's not so much about what you say, it's about expressing yourself. Who cares if it sounds a little bit dumb, doesn't make sense, it's not perfect. That perfectionism has to go, because when you become an adult, you won't be perfectionist anymore. It's not mature to be so perfectionist like a teenager. Adults aren't perfectionists like that. So you should just forget about the perfectionism and being insecure and speak your mind, right? This is how you free yourself to speak your mind. It feels way better than saying nothing. It doesn't have to be perfect. The point is, the best thing is to keep it short and concise. If you hold on too much, if you fight back too much, then there will be no humility left to cultivate. You've fed your pride too much. You've protected your pride too much to the point where there's nothing. You've let it go so easily that there's nothing to work on. There's no pride to renounce. You held on to your pride. That's not good. That means you fought back too much. So when you're dealing with these people, aggression and insults in relationships, in your own words, tell them, no, it's wrong. Once or twice is enough. And then if you can leave, try your best to ignore them as much as you can. Now, about ignoring people and being passive, you want to frame this the right way. Otherwise, you'll feel extremely frustrated and belittled, and you don't have to, right? Because it's just, the way you want to frame it is that it's just more mature to ignore difficult narcissistic people, right? It's more mature. You're being the better person to do this. You're not belittled. You don't have to see yourself as weak or belittled, because it's just more mature to do this. And you can even view yourself as tough and resilient and mature, somebody who doesn't sweat small things, or someone who doesn't react. Because again, if you can ignore people when they're rude to you, that also shows them that you have self-control, that you're mature. You don't sweat small things. So you don't have to see it in such a negative way where you're belittled and weak. You don't have to see it like that. You could frame it like, you don't want to deal with this person's crap. You're not going to. You don't want to give your power to them. You're not going to sweat small things. You're not going to argue about stupid things. You want to be an adult. That's how you can frame it. You want to be resilient. And later, why remain angry at someone who's suffering? Try to look into their suffering. Maybe they are. Sometimes it's clearly perceivable. Then you realize that there could be some karma involved in this relationship. Reflect on their suffering or even meditate on it. You might see that they're suffering a lot. Then you can have more compassion for them. It's good to not give people too much reaction, right? Giving other people reactions is just giving your power away. And finally, try not to sweat the small stuff. An angry person is an angry person. That's their temperament, and they're not really going to change. Most people, their inner nature doesn't change. Obviously, we all change, but the core essence of your personality and your character, that usually doesn't change. Especially, it's already solidified in your teen years as a teenager, and that's why people have these high school reunions sometimes, and a lot of the time you hear people say, "Man, my God, these people haven't changed." Right? So this deep, innate characteristics are not going to go away unless they do some serious work on themselves, which most people don't. So you can't change them. Don't try to change them. Don't hope for the future about that. You just have to deal with it or leave. So don't try to control them. You can either let the person be, deal with them as best as you can. You can't always make verbal comebacks to every single thing that a difficult person says to you. That's okay. It's not perfect. You can't 100%. The scales of justice are not 100% level. That's idealistic. Relationships get out of balance. You know, it's like somebody does a lot of things, the other person could only do so much. That's just how it is. That's life. So try not to sweat the small stuff. Reactions are not as severe, as I said, they're not as severe as attacks, right? Especially when somebody is reacting to you. If it's just a reaction, if it's a bad tone of voice, but it's a reaction, they're the one who's annoyed and angry, not you. They're annoyed and angry. They react to you, or they say something kind of rude. But the thing is, you know, if they're the one who's annoyed or offended, it's their problem. You said something, they got annoyed, they reacted. It's their problem. It's not your problem. It's just a reaction. It's just their reaction. They're not trying, especially if they didn't insult you, then it's just their reaction. If they're not insulting you, but they have a bad tone of voice, it's their problem. They have that crappy and attitude and lack of self-control. It's their problem. It doesn't have as much to do with you, especially if they're not saying anything about you. So for these little harsh tones of voice, these are actually quite petty. They feel stingy at first, but then when you learn to handle them, you realize they're very petty. It's the other person's problem. It's not your problem. It doesn't change you. It doesn't make you look bad, and you can just ignore them. You don't always have to mouth the person back. And this method of ignoring them is called gray rock in counseling, I guess. That's a method of dealing with narcissists. Now, final solutions, as I said before, if you're able to leave, that's the best thing. So you may want to, if you're frustrated, speak out against the person, get your emotions off your chest, address some of the major problems. Don't go on a tangent, ramble on and off. Just, you have to prioritize, right? Keep it short and simple, to the point. Address the most important major problems and forget about the rest. If you just leave them, walk away without complaining, this could be a lot of baggage to let go of. At which point, people will get traumatized from that. You'll need to, but it's fine if you're spiritually invested, if you're serious about spirituality, then that's okay, because you have something to work on now, and it's good to have things to work on that way, right? You left this relationship feeling very frustrated. You didn't say all the stuff you wanted to say. That's still good. You have something to chew on. You have something to meditate on. Those are impressions in your mind. Those thoughts and those memories are impressions. Your mind needs to feed on that to become resilient. So you've given yourself something to meditate on. So you can go back, revisit those problems, meditate on them, learn about them through analytical vipassana meditation. Then this is the process of breaking it down. Those impressions will break down. You'll learn, you'll comprehend. That will exterminate some of your ego. And this is good. This is how to do the work thoroughly and properly. This is how it's just like working out at the gym. You tear your muscles when you're trying to build muscle. You have to tear it first. So what's happening to your mind is that it's gotten torn up by the relationship, and you have to further tear it up or tear it down more by seeing these problems in meditation and comprehending. And that comprehension, as soon as you get it, your mind does tear up. It breaks down. Those egos break, they die. You see them in your dreams. This is the proper way to do the work. But if you're stuck with having to deal with the person for a period of time, you have to accept the situation fully, because you have nowhere else to go. You have to find your means of managing them. Gray rock, or balancing, having that balance between speaking out and letting go, etc. Because all else is insanity. If you're just spinning in this cycle of complaining and you want to get out but you can't, well, you're just making the problem more difficult. You have to accept this situation. So there's no need to grudge, really. It's actually very beneficial to have some problems in life. You need some problems. If you don't have problems, you won't change. Your mind will stay the way it is. It won't become tougher or more resilient. The egos, the conditions of pride and anger and stuff will remain. They will still be there. And that's not good. You need some stimulation. Try to harness compassion for the person, to cultivate it. Once you've broken down your own problems, you've reviewed them, you've learned about them, then you can start thinking about, at any time you can start thinking about what the other person also went through too. Not just with you, but in their previous relationships or in the past. You can even see their past life too when you use meditation and cultivate compassion for them.